Dr. Letai, thank you for finding the time to talk with me about your time at NCI.
It's
And
my
I
pleasure.
just looked at this, and it looks like September 29 was when you were sworn in, so you're at 6 month mark. So you
Yeah,
know where the water fountains are. I'm
about a,
sorry.
about a half year update for you.
Oh, that's fantastic. So you now know where the water fountains are.
I
And a
do,
lot.
right? And which bathrooms work?
Oh, good. Oh, good. And a lot of more useful information as well.
Hopefully.
Yeah, right. So I guess the place to start is the most recent event, which was the president's budget request, which was like a cognitive test for journalists. It was really an amazing thing to look at, where NCI is going to get 9 million under this request, and everybody else gets a cut, and some people get to move or close shop. But it's a really interesting one. What were your thoughts about it?
So it might not surprise you to hear that I have a very NCI centric view of it. Um, the really, completely understand the president has a lot of priorities to consider when he's considering the budget, and it goes even well beyond HHS, let alone NIH and the NCI. But I would say that the president's budget is his proposal is a reflection of, I think, a very solid mission that the NCI has, one that really resonates with the American people, and hopefully also acknowledges that for almost 50 years, the NCI has actually done a pretty good job on executing its mission of reducing suffering from cancer for the American people. Uh, there's, I think, real evidence of how it's delivered for the American people, and the statistics I think you and I have talked about before, like a 30% reduction in cancer mortality since 1990. Those many other small victories, but I think that's a great, many other smaller victories, I should say. They're not, there's no small victories in cancer, I guess. But I think that's a great reflection of the global impact that the NCI has had, whether it has to do with screening and prevention or new therapeutic initiatives. I think you can trace nearly all of them back to having started and been perpetuated by National Cancer Institute grants.
Looking back, I think last time that issue was debated in any way, the issue being whether some institutes should get more than others in terms of proportional increases, was during the doubling and of the NIH budget, which started out as a campaign to double the NCI budget. So it's kind of an interesting thing to be seeing, and also the difference between this year's budget proposal and last year's. A lot has been demonstrated to the administration, it seems.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't have any particular insight into that other than what I just shared with you, which I think with regard to the NCI, I hopefully that it is a reflection of really just an observation that the NCI has a really important mission and does a good job executing on that mission.
How long did you know that this was going to happen?
Well, we have to respond to the president and provide a more detailed budget that undercuts sort of a top line number. So we've known for a few weeks.
Fascinating. I was taken by surprise. I started writing one story and wrote another.
Yeah, I think it's clear a lot of people were taken by surprise. To me, to me, it was yet again evidence uh, that there's a lot of people who write and communicate confidently about things that they simply don't know.
Well, yes.
I don't know. I don't mean you, Paul. I
No,
wasn't.
no, no, no. I know you don't because I really understood it. But I think I was probably one of the very few people who did,
Okay.
which is really strange to see. Yeah, yeah. No, I totally understood the issue, but really at 9 o'clock a.m. On Friday, my story was very different than what it turned out to be.
At 10 o'clock, I was refreshing my browser to see when the budget would actually be released.
Including that table where there's a plus 9 million, which is flat funding, but everybody else is a minus, 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 and out.
I would say credit to the cancer letter for the clearest table on this topic.
Well, thank you. We got it straight from the budget proposal, but yes, we did choose it. So I guess another question that's on everybody's mind is how fast is money moving out of NCI right now?
Yeah, so I think much faster than people realize. First, with regard to non-competing grants, that is, grants that are in their later years of funding, we've paid out, I would say, probably over 1,000 of those. There's no halt in NCI funding. With regard to new research project grants, there's no question that we are behind the rate that we were last year if you take the year as a whole. But I am surprised that that comes as a surprise to people because we had a government shutdown. And that is the main issue that is delaying our paying out of new grants. What people might not have noticed before, but this is nothing new, is once we at the NCI complete our scientific review and sort of give a stamp of approval to a grant, there's still roughly about 90 days of some back and forth and administrative work that needs to be performed in order for an actual check to be written. So there's sort of the approval. I mean, people are familiar with just-in-time information, but there's additional back and forths between us and the contracting institution, as well as between us and NIH and ultimately HHS. The numbers that you see online, a very important point is that a lot of those numbers are from publicly available repositories like NIH Reporter that are just not up to date at all. And I do wish that was better up to date. And I understand people seeing that and thinking that's the sum total. But at this point, we have here at the NCI, we have. I just going to refer to some information that, with regard to approval funds that are actually out the door. Our competing RPGs is close to 150. There's additional number that will soon be over 200. I would guess in the next week, as some clear approval at the NIH level and so forth. And we anticipate, now that the machine is going, now that we could start up and the machine is going, we'd anticipate approving like 200 to 300 new research project grants every month, and don't see a difficulty in completing, paying out our extramural budget by the end of the fiscal year, which ends at the end of September. This is despite challenges of it's a new system. We are operating on a new system, so things are always going to be a little bit bulky at the beginning of that system. But really, I want to make it clear, there are no real major speed bumps or impediments in our way to getting these grants out the door. The major impediment really was the government shutdown. And I think it's a credit to the NCI staff who've been doing an excellent job, given the many changes that have come their way, to keep business as usual, keep the grant money flowing out to the extramural programs. As is typical, as is usual, roughly 75% of the entire NCI budget is going to the extramural program, and fiscal year 2026 is going to follow exactly that pattern.
Mm-hmm. Is there a table you could share, something that might be something more up to date than what you shared with NCAB? We would just run it with your answer.
Right. Let me check with Nancy and some of the other comms people. We'll see if we can get you that.
Okay, because that would be an interesting thing that people would be that would calm people down a bit. It's interesting.
I agree.
Yeah, it's really interesting because we're talking about we're covering the same territory as we covered before and as you covered at NCAB, but I think it's important to do it because at a time when you're trying to project stability, it's nice to tell people that they didn't mishear you.
Right. I think, yeah, I agree. I think it's good to provide facts. I think that, as I may have mentioned before, I can't remember, I am concerned by what I see as misinformation, uh, both in major publications as well as people who I think purport to be, uh, serving the extramural community on the internet or on Twitter or one of these social media platforms, but they actually don't. When they have incomplete information and yet opine confidently on the direction of the NCI, I think it often serves to demoralize early stage investigators at a stage when there really should be no demoralization. I would expect that we will give out more grants this year than more new grants this year than last year, that we will give out more ESI grants this year than last year. And I also expect that we will spend more on the extramural program this year than we did last year. And last year was a record year.
But I guess it's still kind of, well, I guess it's always a complicated thing because you always kind of hover at about 10% success rate.
Right. That's something what I've taken to describing as we need to keep an eye both on the weather and on the climate. I think there's been a lot of focus on the weather lately, and people bring up important details like the loss of pay lines, the whether or not we're going to have to institute multi-year funding, whether how indirect costs are going to fall down, and priorities that are more temporally close, right? But we're still doing this in a climate where there are way more applications than we could ever fund. And some of this has to do with, and if you look at a success rate, let's call it a success rate rather than a pay line. If you look at a success rate, I expect that we will be over 10% in fiscal year 2026. In fiscal year 2025, we were really about 9%, which may come as a surprise to people who favored sharing a completely inaccurate 4% number. The fact is that, the funding environment is still only going to allow us to fund roughly 1 in 10 grants due to the increase in number of application, increase in number of investigators, and relatively stable NCI funding.
The 4% number, the derivation of that, if I remember correctly, was that it was if you went to full funding, 3-year funding, then this is what's going to happen. But that's not what happened.
I agree, but I think the conditional aspect of that statement was lost on many people. And the very sort of pessimistic 4% pay line is what a lot of people have in their minds.
So it's just wrong. It's
I
really
agree.
at the most recent NCAB, I was texting with one of the cancer center directors, and it was a lot of fun. And it's nice to multitask. And one of the things that I heard was, hey, we budget 1 year at a time. We don't need to have money sitting there for someone. So for this grant in the bank, because we need to use it now. We want to use it now, rather. And what would be your advice to that center director, who I think probably represents all of them?
So first, I just want to make it clear that NCI will obey directives on multi-year funding from OMB and from Congress, both of whom give opinions on this issue. But we don't make the rules. We just simply obey the rules. I will say that the negative impact of multi-year funding isn't as pure and extreme as I think some think it is. There's a couple issues to unpack here. One is the issue that if you do multi-year fund, that frees you up the next year, budget-wise, and not having to fund the out years. That is, if you fund years 1 through 5, if you fund the first 5 years of a grant, then for the next 5 years, you don't have to fund that grant anymore. And that frees you up to make more funding. Now, if you radically went from 0 to 100% multi-year funding all in the same year, yes, for that year, you would only be able to give 1/5 of the grants. That is not what happened. That is not what I expect would happen. The right now, reading the tea leaves, I don't see Well, let me put it this way. Last year, Congress uh, asked us not to multi-year funding beyond the amount of multi-year funding in the year 2020, fiscal year 2025. So that's what we're doing for fiscal year 2026. In the president's budget, there was a request for multi-year funding. And so, of course, we are obeying that in our budget estimates. We will have to see uh, what actually appears in the budget that is passed by Congress and signed by the president ultimately. And as you know, there can be a lot of changes between here and there. But because accompanying the multi-year funding request, there's also a request that indirect costs be capped at 15%. Our estimate is that under the president's budget as written, we'd be able to fund the same amount of grants that we fund this year. I will say that I think that's another aspect that's misunderstood by investigators. Investigators should understand that both direct costs and indirect costs come out of the same budget at the NCI. We have a limited number of monies to expend. We don't have some separate budget given to us by the government for indirect costs. So the higher indirect costs are, the less money there is for direct costs. The lower indirect costs, the more money there are for direct costs, and essentially the more grants we can give. So that's why even if we did full funding of our grants, that is multi-year funding of our grants, but at the same time that was compensated by a cut in indirect costs, we can keep the total number of new grants stable.
Well, this is a matter of great concern to a lot of institutions. If indeed they have to cap it at indirect costs, that kind of ends things. But of course, you're not the one writing the budget.
Right. What I need to do is I need to focus on accommodating under the constraints that are given to us by the government, which is both the executive and legislative branches. Under those constraints, we need to maintain as best we can a healthy extramural community.
So you can't really do very much about that. Well, what about advice to cancer centers, for example, that are that are getting a promised certain amounts of money, like the RO1s for 5 years? How do they adjust their budgets?
Oh, yeah, let me get back to that. So what my understanding of the multi-year funding is we commit that 5 years. Now that money, say we pay them 5 years, that money doesn't go in some escrow account either at the NCI or at the institution. That money is going to be there for them, but it's held by the Treasury, by the US Treasury. Now, the advantage though, there is an advantage, which is if there were changes if we approve a budget for a full 5 years, we've sort of written that off. And that, even if it's not sitting in the university or the cancer center's coffers, that money is set aside for them. So if there are dramatic cuts to something or other over the subsequent 5 years, there is security in knowing actually your money is stable and that's being held somewhere. That's sort of already expended, that's off our books. So there is actually an advantage to stability and sort of the sort of insurance against later year cuts in multi-year funding. So it's not all bad, even though they do budget once a year. There is an advantage to getting the multi-year funding.
Could we talk about the NOFO for the cancer centers?
Yes.
What are some of the features that you see? Beyond. Well, is there anything beyond what we've written about, or what do you see about in all of that?
So it's not complete yet, but I can give you some overall trends to it. One is we want to simplify it. There was too much paperwork, too many details that really were not essential for decision making. We probably don't need every CV of every last person or every publication of every last person who provides a CV, for instance. And there were just pages and pages and pages that were unnecessary for decision making. And in fact, impossible for human decision making. So that's one aspect, is just simplification. Another thing is that I do want to emphasize, and it's something I do want to emphasize a little bit more as a condition for cancer center designation, is in the United States, we need to do a better job of making our clinical trials efficient. They need to start faster, enroll faster, and complete faster. And because I think we've been a little bit lax on this, there has been, we've lost significantly our competitive stance with respect to other countries and early phase clinical trials across the board, but certainly it has affected oncology greatly. We can't do the job uh, of, of improving cancer care for American people if we offshore all our early phase clinical trials. And we're heading that direction and we're in danger of that. So we need to reverse that. Now, I do not mean at all to say that the only place the correction is needed is at the cancer centers, because I certainly do not believe that's the case. The Health and Human Services is very much aware of this and just had a meeting today. There's many different agencies involved in trying to solve this problem. And I'm very happy to say I'm very pleased to be working with the FDA as partners, and they certainly see ways that they can streamline regulation. So, but I do want to say that we will be evaluating the ability of cancer centers to efficiently start and complete clinical trials as part of our evaluation. I don't have any more details. I don't see that as applying hard metrics, us applying hard metrics to adjudicate that, but that will be a factor in our evaluation. That is, of course, only for clinical cancer centers or comprehensive. Um, the last thing I want to say is that we will be people, I think this is already clear to the cancer centers, is that whereas it will not come before the scientific review committee, that still is going to happen, and it won't change the scientific review committee's score, we do still feel that it's important to have a site visit. It will likely be a shorter site visit. It'll be more focused, more directed, rather than sort of a long book report of tell me everything that your cancer center has done over the last 5 years. It'll be more focused to address problems that have been identified on both sides of the equation, both the cancer center and NCI side of the equation. But we do think it's important to have a site visit. We are trialing that out. In fact, I think first one will be this month.
Oh, 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 fascinating. What is the role of the information you get from the site visit? Is it going to be going to you and the NCAB as they're considering renewal or granting of designation? And then you decided whether to grant it or to increase or decrease, or how does it work?
Right. I think you can think about it similar to, say, an RO1, where there's a Center for Scientific Review that provides us with a score. And the peer review is very important in our decision making. But there is not a pay line. There isn't just a single line in the sand. It's very influential. The score that comes out of peer review is very influential, but it's not the final word. The final word will incorporate information that we get both from the site visit and from the peer review.
So you will decide to use that information to determine whether to adjust the grant.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. And I think it'll be most influential on borderline cases. Someone who is a great cancer center that has a long-standing great score and has always gotten a great score. It's probably not going to influence our decision much how the site visit goes.
Looking at the early phase clinical trials, there's a lot of for-profits that do them right now and do them pretty well globally and in the United States. What role can NCI play, if any, with some of these for-profit entities?
I don't know that we have much of a direct role. They tend not to get a lot of money from us. And I will say they have, in a way, they're already very incentivized to be efficient. And they can often demonstrate that they are more efficient than some academic centers. However, they often have a different mission from the academic centers, and there's often a different kind of clinical trial being performed at NCI designated cancer centers than at than the for-profit clinical trial organizations. That's not to say one is better or one is worse. It's just they're different. I think you're obviously investigator-initiated trials are unlikely to find a home at the for-profit clinical trial centers, just as one example.
Looking at the cancer vaccines,
Yeah.
You just rolled that out, and with the cancer vaccines, why did you decide that you needed a roadmap? I have no opinion. I'm not entitled to one, but why have a roadmap as opposed to having just letting science run its course?
Part of it is the structure. The and rather as opposed to letting science run its course. I see. Well, I think that what I hope to do at the NCI, I think there's times in the life of a technology where um, a large organization has an opportunity to sort of place a bet and to rapidly force an exciting new field into a decision point. Basically, is it going to work or is it not going to work? I thought, and I can't tell you that I can identify a single metric to make a decision like this, but looking at the literature and seeing some very exciting responses or very exciting results, even in some circumstances that are often pretty dire, like some advanced solid tumors, it made me think that there is likely something to the cancer vaccine project. I'll call it the cancer therapeutic vaccine project, because it's not a preventative strategy, it's a therapeutic strategy. And there are other very worthy preventative cancer vaccines that can be used to prevent cancer. This is distinct from that. These are largely vaccines given to people who have had a resection or in a minimal residual disease state, but at very high risk for a fatal relapse. Anyway, in many of these very dire contexts, there seems to be evidence that these cancer vaccines can provide, in some cases, shockingly, long disease-free survival, even, dare I use the word, cure. And this is something that I think we should try to accelerate, and partly just had to call it an aesthetic decision, but I think that based on the growing scientific evidence, it was time to just try to gather some larger numbers and pick some technologies. There's multiple approaches. I want to devote the resources to really identify the best technologies and try to move this forward very rapidly. I think this is a case where there's some excellent science that has been performed over decades to get where we are right now. And now we have an opportunity, and it's an opportunity in the field to just really put our foot on the gas pedal. There's a lot of very clear hypotheses that need testing, and I want to do what we can to test them as rapidly as possible.
And it's all clinical. So, and
well, there's a lot of great correlative studies that will be assigned to these. I also want to make it clear this will be led by our superb partners at the FNIH. The Foundation for the NIH will actually be leading this program. The NCI will be a very significant contributor in terms of money, and I hope both that and in-kind support, perhaps correlatives, perhaps production of material. But this will be led by the FNIH because we see it as a public-private partnership, and that's something that the NCI can't take care of on its own.
Well, you would think that some of it will fall to the NCTN groups, to the cooperative groups.
Well, we'll see. The structure of the clinical trials and indeed the specific technology that we brought forward are going to be further elaborated in the design phase. And that's what our next step is the design phase of these protocols. I hope we can achieve significant resources enough to do, as proposed, the full 3 clinical trials and their associated clinical correlative studies.
Actually, I forgot NCORPs. They too can be used, right? All of this can be used. You have access to patients and the structure that nobody else has. Who would?
Right. I think we're likely to. Our plan right now is to do this in 2 phases. The early phase will be really technological testing and production, and there will be a second phase that would occur after the first 3 years. That would be more about spreading it more broadly around the country and implementing it in the sort of broad clinical trial organizations that you just mentioned.
Oh, this will be really an interesting story to cover. Now comes functional precision oncology. What do you plan to do? How do you plan to bring it about?
So I'll first just define what I mean by functional precision oncology or functional precision medicine. It's really a very simple idea, which is if you want to know if a particular drug works on a particular tumor, take the living cells of that tumor and expose it to that drug and see what happens. Now, this idea originated several decades ago and is in fact used all the time in microbiology when we're choosing antibiotics for bacterial infections. But it didn't work so well, and it was largely due to technical reasons. There's nothing wrong with the principle. And both through work my lab's been doing, as well as many other labs around the world, the technology is there now to make some very accurate predictions based on these ex vivo readouts. And there's many different ways to do them, but there's based on these ex vivo readouts, we can predict what's going to happen in vivo. Now, people are very used to the job of precision medicine and oncology being performed almost exclusively by genomics. And genomics has a lot of successes, but most people don't get benefit out of genomics still to this day. And I think that there is a lot of room for the addition of additional sort of excellent predictive biomarkers. Functional precision medicine can also be used for discovery. I don't want to overlook that either, where you essentially take a piece of a patient's tissue, apply 10, 100 drugs, 1,000 drugs if you have enough tissue, and identify the ones that work, and you can learn a lot from that. I wouldn't be surprised if people listening to this thought that it was sort of a pipe dream, but I would say that's probably because they just haven't kept up with the literature. This is actually, I think, ready to be deployed both in the clinic as well as in discovery platforms. And I think you're going to increasingly see it. Now, what will the NCI's role be? I don't know specifically, but I plan on devoting both intramural and extramural resources to this. We are going to have a workshop at the beginning of July. We're rapidly getting the planning together because I want to move this quickly. But we will plan on hosting a workshop at the beginning of July, and I hope an output of that workshop will be some more specific planning as to both the intramural and the extramural resources that we're going to apply to this issue.
It's a metric of how long I've been doing this. I was actually covering this when this was considered the science that's going to move the ball forward, and that was going back to hamburger salmon clonogenic assay.
Right.
And, yeah.
Back in your teens, Paul.
Yeah, back in my teens. Well, it wasn't that much past that. I was in my 20s, and there was also a few other people who moved it forward from hamburger salmon. There were also a little bit of quackery going on, but yeah.
I think that was a challenge. I think you sometimes see this in a field where people outstrip their results. People's comments and what would I say? The way they support their studies in public outstrips the actual data, and that can actually have a long-term harmful effect on a field. And I think that happened to the kind of ex vivo chemosensitivity field, and that's why it needed to be kind of reborn.
Yeah, it was interesting because my own sort of memory of this. My mother had ovarian cancer, and you know, being very smart, we tried one of those tests, and it showed, oh, Taxol will be very effective, but really, you were dealing with really blunt tools and bad drugs,
and not many drugs. So if you're going to choose among drugs, it's nice to have a set of drugs to choose among, and if it's sort of like platinum or Taxol, there weren't a lot of choices. Really, I think people starting out nowadays just I don't think realize how many few arrows were in our quiver in the late 90s.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It was completely fascinating to watch how that technology was being overinterpreted, and we certainly wrote a lot about it. I wrote a lot about it. But yeah,
to the point, I'd just say to the point where ASCO has made a few statements on the field saying that testing with these types of assays should be performed in the setting of a clinical trial, and they can't recommend broad use of them. I would say that there's more data now, including positive randomized controlled trials. And I think we're getting to the point where stronger recommendations can be made for the use of these.
Well, Sid Salmon, who was kind of the rabbi of that field, uh, was saying don't use it for clinical decision making because he was a good scientist. Although the test had his name on it, which was also great. But anyway, that's going back into some old stuff. But maybe we should skip forward to Doge. Speaking of blunt tools, it is there any part of NCI that was Doged that you are trying to bring back?
Um, I don't know that I can point to a single aspect of it. I think that um, the sort of I think the main drive in the Doge cuts was cost saving, and I think it's true, and I think they would probably admit that they cut with a fairly blunt tool to begin with, and we are doing some more surgical rehiring. I wouldn't say that it's in one field or another, but or one office or another. But I would say that there were some opportunities to, I think, add some more people to gain back some functions that we really needed.
How many people are you adding in?
I don't know the exact number, but it's probably we're close to 300 across the NCI. We'll be adding in over the next year. Is that right, Nate? Yeah, about 300.
It's about 300.
Yeah.
Well, that's not a small number. Well, is there anything I forgot to ask? Anything you would like to throw in?
Um, this smells like a trap, Paul. This is where
No,
you like.
I
This
have
is
no
where
trap.
you,
I do not lay traps, or else I would. Yeah, that's not what I
I
do.
don't know.
But no, no trap.
Yeah, I look forward to sort of addressing the extramural community en masse at the ACR in San Diego. I will be speaking there, and I do look forward to that to really share. They shouldn't be looking for any bombshells, but to share what I think is, I would say a fairly optimistic point of view of what it's like to do research in cancer biology nowadays.
Well, it's not even just bombshells that they should. They. It's about there being a lack of bombs. That's what they're really looking for.
Yeah, I'd say even yeah, I'd say the lack of bombs is it's the dog that didn't bark, right? Very significant in the Sherlock Holmes story, and I think very significant here as well.
Right, right. Well, thank you so much, and congratulations on your 6 month mark at NCI.
All right, thanks,
All
Paul.
right, thanks.